Good afternoon and welcome to the final episode of Urban 411 as we wrap up our Black History Month conversation. I want to invite you to two important events that I want to tell you about before we forget. One is taking place on February 22nd from 1:30 to 3:30 here at Reconnect Inc. We're having our second anniversary for the Kyle Wayne LaFleur Resource and Employment Center. So if you get a chance, please come by. It's Saturday, February 21st from 1 to 3:30, 1941 South 42nd Street, Suite 502. The next event is a Black History Month art exhibit. I'll be showcasing art that was drawn by my mom to celebrate not only her rich legacy as a Black woman growing up in Mississippi, but to also to educate us about what took place in terms of art. My mom always said that art was a way in which we can have difficult conversations where people would listen by showing the experience that we actually went through. That's going to take place on February 22nd from 3:30 to 5:30 at 1941 South 42nd Street off of Center. So please join us. So let's get back to our episode. We've been covering a lot through the month of February, and this is our inaugural debut of Urban 411. So we're going to wrap it up by just kind of summarizing what we've talked about this month and how we can now put it to action moving forward. We talked about owning our voices and making better choices and living up to our expectations we have of ourselves. And today we're going to talk about how we can now take all of this and become our own leaders. And what I mean by that is all too often throughout most of our history, most Black American progress has been defined through leadership organizations. In fact, we're probably one of the few groups in America that our leaders are picked by organizations. People view us based on who the organization is speaking for us. So we're going to talk about how we can own our own voices and become our own leaders. Well, you just can't jump into it. It requires that we prepare ourselves. And what I would suggest to you is whatever you choose to lead yourself in, become proficient in it. Become a subject matter expert in terms of that issue that you want to talk about. Therefore, you talk with a voice that people are going to be able to authenticate as well as be able to believe and rely upon. One thing that we can do in terms of becoming our own leader is that we have two important dates coming up. We have the census and we have the vote. Our census is it's a no-brainer. We have to get ourselves counted and registered. However, we have to also advocate to make sure once we're counted, how will those numbers now reflect how resources come back into our community? Well, that's where your vote comes in. You have to make sure that the people we're putting into office will be able to be that person that will channel the resources back into our community to use to uplift us. And I don't mean just manage poverty, but to overcome poverty. Not just to manage discrimination and racism, but to help us overcome it. And that's where you have your most important role. Not only do you have a role to play by voting for those people, but you have to not just listen to what people are saying, but actually interview these people, attend sessions, become informed on what candidates represent. Will they represent your values? Another way in which you can become your own leader is by attending the lawmaking sessions where legislation is being passed and may impact you. Attending your county government and your city council meetings to make sure that they're speaking for you in terms of the people you put in office. No longer do we have to just live our lives through the Urban League or the NAACP or other civil rights organizations. I'm not saying they're no longer important, but what I am saying is that for far too long, we as African Americans have been validated only through those two main organizations. And as their purpose and position change, they may no longer be the proper tool to represent you. We have to learn how to represent ourselves. And so leadership means you deciding what issues are important to you and you're being willing to commit yourself and educating yourself on how you're going to represent those views going forward. I have a few passions. I have child success in terms of juvenile reform, and I have adult reentry. Those are my passions. I will refuse to allow those two views to be represented through anybody but me. Now, I might collaborate with other organizations, but I'm never going to vest my right to speak on those views through somebody else. And that's what I mean by becoming your own leader. The leader lies within. Your cause may not be juvenile justice or reentry reform. It may be something else. It could be the environment. It could be economic development. It could be addressing the gentrification of our North Omaha community. Whatever it is, take the time to educate yourself on what it is, and then make sure that you put people in power that's going to reflect your views. You might not get 100% of everything you want, but at least you're going to have your views represented to some degree. If a person doesn't speak for you through their views and values, then don't let them have your vote. And whether it means not voting for a traditional party that you've always voted for, or seeking to run for office yourself, what you're going to have to do at some point is understand that not everybody is going to represent us better than what we are able to represent ourselves. And so collaborate, get involved, do all that. But don't ever give over your voice. Don't ever give over your power. Don't ever give over your right to be your own best leader. And so I'm just going to leave you with that. It's how you're going to develop yourself to now take on leadership responsibility. And with that, let's transition now into some of the things that are going on in our North Omaha community. And when I say North Omaha community, I don't mean Black people. I mean geographical location. All too often, we tend to define the North Omaha community by people. No, those are North Omaha people. We're talking about the North Omaha boundaries, which extend in a geographical area. What I see going on is what most people are seeing, is that gentrification under the guise of urban renewal or city planning. And most people who have a lot to benefit from that, they're accepting the term city planning. But what I see when I drive through communities is that city planning should not just be in a defined area. If you really want to plan for the city to make people be able to reap the benefits of the city, then some of the things that you're doing should extend beyond just the certain geographical area that seems to be now the focus point. It makes no sense for us to get happy when we're talking about developing 24th and Lake Street when you drive into neighborhoods and you see deteriorating homes, you see raggedy streets, you see an infrastructure that does not support the people who live in these areas. So it might make people feel good to say that we have dollars put into a certain area, but those dollars need to be dispersed more on a wider base to make sure that the people who actually live in those areas are benefiting from them. The conversations that are taking place now, one I understand is how best to use 24th and Lake Street. From what I understand, most of the people at the table do not even live in that area. So how can you tell what's best if you do not have to go through what the people who live in that community go through? For example, the other morning I was driving down 24th Street and I went from one end of Lake Street to the other, and then I went from one end of 24th Street to the other, and then I went to the extremes of Lake Street, and I started driving through neighborhoods. And what hurt me was how those economic development dollars are available for structures, but I saw the decaying and the deteriorating homes in those areas. The streets were not in proper repair. Those are the type of things that we're going to have to hold elected officials accountable for. And I don't mean as a group, I mean as an individual. If you see something in the city of Omaha that you do not like, then you take the leadership role and bring it into their attention. You should not have to wait to go to a community meeting or a neighborhood meeting. What you should do is be going down to the city council, writing your city council members, and going down to the county government, because that is what leaders do. They lead. They don't follow behind other people. If you don't like what you're seeing in your community, then you lead the charge. Don't wait for something to happen. There's a saying that the cavalry is not coming. That cavalry is you, it's me, it's each of us. We all can make a difference by becoming leaders, because everybody can lead. As Martin Luther King said, everybody can lead because everybody can serve. And it's not just about just serving, it's about actually doing things that's going to bring about better conditions for us, the people who mean something to us, in our community around us. And I would just tell you that now is a good time, because you're going to have the ear of people who are running for offices. But don't just stop there, hold them accountable. And be a voice. Find out what's going on in your area. I have frequently contacted the mayor's office for some property that we own that we can't get properly insured because the two homes on the side of it are deteriorating. And it just amazes me the excuses I keep getting from the lawmakers about not having money to tear down these homes, but yet they have money for other things. And I don't plan on giving that fight up. I'm going to continue to fight until we get those neighborhoods back in conditions where they mirror the ones out west. The conditions that exist in the North Omaha geographical location would not be allowed to exist 5 minutes in West Omaha or Elkhorn or other parts of the city. So why are we tolerating them here? It's because we keep waiting for people to speak for us and we want to speak through other people. What we want to do is start as homeowners, as renters, is using our voice. Kids should not have to walk around or walk through neighborhoods where there is dilapidated homes, the streets are not in good repair, snow is not being shoveled. That's where it comes time for us to speak up and use our voice. Another area that I'll close with is when it comes to reform. There's a bunch of people making money off of reform initiatives. The salaries are outrageous, but yet the people who are most going to be impacted by the reform are not a part of the conversations, nor have they been brought to the table. Don't wait for an invitation. Show up and speak up. Let them know that this is not going to be passed without your voice and your input. And you may have to, bust in there and move a couple of chairs around or do whatever it takes. But what you want to do is take the lead on that. Because we have a lot invested in making sure that we get the reform that we need, not only for our children, but for our adults. And that's how we then take all that we've learned through these years, the experience lived and what we've read about, to make Omaha a better place for our community, to make the world a better place for our community. African Americans, whether it's Omaha, Nebraska, or Harlem, New York, should not have to be relegated to second-class citizenry in terms of how the public and how laws benefit. Equality of law does not always mean equality of outcomes when it comes to African Americans. It just does not naturally flow until we make it flow. So as we wrap up Black History Month, I hope that the things that you've been involved in for Black History Month will not end on Saturday, February 29th, but it will become part of a 365-day, 7-day-a-week effort on your part to not just teach Black history, but to actually learn our history. I conclude by saying, remember, our history did not start with slavery, nor did it end with the Civil Rights Movement. So go out, lead, and make it happen. And I'll see you next week.